All right, so let's get started. Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Father's Day, wherever you are. And yeah, so I got this email about 15 minutes ago asking for some. Oh, nice, Casey, you started freelancing. Good. That's what I've been doing for 6 years. So good luck with that. Let me know if you have any questions. This is actually a freelancing. Well, not really a freelancing question, but it certainly relates, I think. Yeah, 20 under the table. It's not bad. It's like 30 in real life, so it's pretty good. Okay, so here I got this email about 15 minutes ago. I'll just read it out loud. So, hey Dan, thanks for the tutorials. I've been following your channel for a few months now, and after going through several of your React Redux lessons, I was able to get an offer for an internship, but there are a couple catches. It's an unpaid internship, number one, and number two, I'm not in college. I graduated 4 years ago. I need to pay bills like rent and car loan. I've only been working on web dev for a little under a year, and I'm transitioning from my current job as a teacher, like you, into programming. Should I take this offer or just keep studying on my own? Thanks again. And next time I'm in New York, I would like to buy you a beer. Jake. Thanks, Jake. I will certainly take you up on that beer. So, should you work for free if you're just starting out? It's a tough one. Have I ever worked for free? Absolutely. In fact, even recently, I still work for free sometimes, depending on the circumstance. But obviously, I'm not a beginner. If you're just starting out, working for free can be a double-edged sword. And do I recommend it? Well, as with most things, it depends. Hi, Sanjay. How are you? First and foremost, is the company a reputable company, right? So is it a good company that's offering you a free internship? And if so, then absolutely you should work for free. So what qualifies as a good company? There are the obvious ones like Indeed or like Google, or Google wouldn't do free internships. They'd pay you handsomely, but a company like that, or like I don't know, like Priceline or something like that, LinkedIn. These are reputable companies with strong brands, strong tech teams. If they offer you a free internship, yeah, absolutely you should take it. But in most of those cases, those internships wouldn't be free anyway, and they're hyper competitive, so you probably wouldn't be getting those anyway, especially at a place like Google or Apple, someplace like that. Oh, thanks, Sanjay. I'm glad you're watching. So yeah, that's case number one. That's the ideal scenario. So if you get an offer from a very strong company like that, then yeah, take the offer. Most likely that's not the case. A lot of companies offer free internships, just masquerading as internships. What they really want is just free labor. You see this a lot in startups, very much in startups, and I've done my fair share of that. So once you enter into that territory, you have to consider the strength of the team and the nature of the project. More React Native. Yeah, that's on the way. We're doing one right now. It takes a while to get those React Native videos together, Sanjay. Each one takes like a month to record. So we just finished one. But if you look at the date of the first video, it's like the first week of May, I think. So just be patient. We're doing more React Native. But go through what we have right now. I think there's 3 full tutorials on React Native on there. And they're pretty good. So yeah, just work your way through those. So what was I saying? Okay, so if you get an offer from like a startup that has a tight budget and is looking to save money on interns, that's where the question gets a lot more murky. There's a much more of a gray area in that case. So key considerations in that scenario are the strength of the tech team, who would you be working under, and the nature of the stack. So what stack would you be doing? So if the stack is an outdated stack, or one of the sort of low-end stacks, like like PHP WordPress type of thing, then it's not worth it anyway. You're not going to get any residual benefit from the experience. And if you're not being paid, then you're not getting any benefit at all, right? So that's not really worth your time. Another example might be like Angular 1. There are still a lot of code bases out there in Angular 1 because Angular 1 was so popular for a number of years that all these companies that were built on it, and they're reluctant to migrate away because it's such a massive code base. They have to do a whole rewrite. Otto, let me just read your question real quick. How do you think it is best to break into the industry tech in US? Otto, what country are you writing from? A lot of it depends on where you're writing from. So and then whether or not you need what's called H-1B visa sponsorship. If you're looking for visa sponsorship, it's going to be much more difficult. You're just going to have to be an insanely good programmer if you're going to be looking for visa sponsorship. If you're trying to do remote in the US, then it's really no different than how anyone else would break in, regardless of where you're from. But a big part of it is where you're from in terms of, how well do you speak English and how well do you understand the culture. Maybe I should do another video on this, but there is a culture barrier that I've noticed a lot when I'm working with overseas teams that can hinder their ability to secure new clients, at least in the United States. That's a whole separate topic. In fact, that might be worth its own video. So I might do that later on today or another one tomorrow. So going back to Jake's question. So yeah, I would follow up this email with asking for more details. Most notably, what's the company? Who would you be working under as far as a tech lead? And what is the nature of their stack? Assuming those things are in place. So I think I was discussing Angular 1 and how a lot of companies are still using Angular 1 because their code bases were written, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years ago when Angular 1 was the main thing. They tend to be reluctant to move away because it's so expensive to do an entire rewrite. A lot of companies bite the bullet and do that anyway. But those companies have a lot of money and strong development teams. If you're a strapped startup and you can't do a whole rewrite just because of a new framework, then migrating away from Angular 1 is not really an option. So in that case, you might want to stay away from that company. So Otto, you're in a country where PHP. Well, if you're happy with that, we're doing PHP work in your country in Europe, then that's fine. React and Node, you're probably not going to find too many jobs. It depends on the country in Europe, right? I mean, that could be Great Britain or it could be Ukraine, right? So those are two very different markets. So I'm guessing you're in an area where there aren't too many React Node jobs, you just told me that, so it's probably not going to be London. You might want to consider just London even, because there are a lot of more progressive stacks over there. But if you're making a lot of money with PHP contracts where you are, whatever pays the bills, right? So as far as trying to break into the U.S. Tech scene from overseas, that's typically done through the job boards. So I forget what they're called, like Upwork and Dice, I think, are the more popular ones. I'm not as familiar with those job boards because I tend to stay away. But most of the Europeans and the East Asians and the Indian countries, they tend to be on those job boards, and from there they basically just compete on price. So Otto, if you're dead set on breaking into the U.S. tech scene, like if that is your goal, then I would put myself on Upwork and market my services for React and Redux at $35 an hour. Keep it under 40, and do that in Upwork and put in bids for jobs in New York City and San Francisco, the tech hotspots, and you'll find work. You'll get gigs. That's just the way it goes. And the rest is your ability to acclimate to the U.S. culture and understand how business is done in the United States versus whatever country you're in right now. which is not to be understated, by the way. Like I said, a lot of times when I'm working with overseas teams, the culture barrier seems to be significant. Sometimes, well, yeah, a lot of times. So, okay, so where was I on this free work thing? So, I guess what I'll do is I'll go through my experiences. So, what I did when I started at programming in 2010. Um, It was a few months later that somebody had approached me to work on his project. He was an acquaintance from my previous job. And at that point, I was nowhere near professional caliber. So I wasn't comfortable accepting money. I just wasn't good enough at that point. But I did say that if your app, it was an iPhone app, I said, if your iPhone app gets a lot of sales, then I'll just take percentages off the sales. So, yeah, Upwork has a very bad reputation in the United States amongst developers beyond a certain caliber. Um, for me, I would never use Upwork because I would never get a gig on Upwork at my rates, right? It just won't happen. But my rates typically range from 150 an hour to as high as $300 an hour. On Upwork, I'm not going to be able to get that ever. So Upwork is a combination of the supply and demand where the expectations are mutually understood. So, for example, Otto, if you're billing 35 bucks an hour, the people on Upwork are going to expect to find developers who charge anywhere between 25 to $40 an hour. So there's not going to be any sticker shock or any sort of like outlandish expectation in terms of rates and whatnot. Um, yeah, yeah, Casey, that's why I'm thinking about moving out of New York City because it's a lot of that money goes to paying my rent, and the office. So uh, I don't need to. My clients are not in New York City, so I often ask myself, why do I stay here? I should just go to Florida or maybe Portland, Oregon, right? And not pay what I'm paying in rent. So, but Otto, you have to understand that the perspective you're receiving from Reddit users are primarily from U.S. based people. Reddit is primarily American, has an American readership, right? So that skews the perspective. Um, and if you can get on Upwork and get your first maybe 2 or 3 US based clients, then do a good job from there. You shouldn't be on Upwork for too long. It shouldn't be more than 6 months before you're able to move away from Upwork and then start doing work, branching off into your own professional network. So, yeah, certainly, yeah, you're right. The reputation is not very good amongst US based developers, but you got to start somewhere. It's not a bad idea if you're a beginner. If I was first starting out, I would definitely consider Upwork. I would definitely do it. I wouldn't just consider it, I would do it. But when I was first starting out, Upwork didn't exist, so I didn't do it. Casey, I'm actually thinking about Vermont. I don't know if you saw this, but Vermont is offering a $10,000 like grant to anyone who moves to Vermont because their tax base is shrinking because everyone's retiring and I guess dying off. I'm not really sure, but nobody's moving to Vermont right now, and everyone who's living there right now is getting older, and the tax base is shrinking, and so the governor of Vermont is offering a $10,000 just grant, and yeah, it sounds pretty appealing to me. At the rate I'm willing to work for, $20 an hour, to be honest, the wage. So yeah, Otto, I would recommend 30 an hour because in the United States, once you get below 30, you're entering a territory of you're entering a rate that reflects more poorly on you than otherwise. It looks like you're unprofessional and desperate when you're charging $20 an hour in the United States. The only way it's really plausible is if you're a college kid or even a high school kid, like just starting out. Um, I don't know your situation. Maybe that is your situation, but if you're like, 30 years old or late 20s, if you're considerably out of school and you're still charging 20 an hour, it reflects poorly on you as a professional in the United States. So like in other countries, $20 an hour might be a very handsome living, but here, that would that would suggest to me that you're a very poor developer, and I wouldn't hire you based on that, unless you're like plausibly young. So like you're a college sophomore, in which case that's about what I would expect to pay. If I have a couple of college students working under me right now. That's what I pay them. But these are people still in college. Um, yeah, there's that factor to consider, and that's what I mean by culture, right? There's a cultural aspect here that may not apply in other countries, and I'm just not familiar enough with the culture in other countries. But I'm in the United States, so it's incumbent upon other people to understand our culture, and that's just how it works. So you're using Spring, which is Java, and JavaScript. Otto, it seems like your English is okay, so that's a good sign. I would still recommend 30 an hour in the United States when you go on Upwork, just to add a little bit of credibility to your professional presentation. You definitely need to have a portfolio. That's true no matter where you're from. This is something that most people also don't really listen to me on. Like I tell them they need a portfolio, and then 3 months later, I ask them, "Hey, how's your portfolio coming?" And they're like, "Oh, I had to work on other stuff for now." It's like, well, then I guess you're not taking this whole job thing too serious, because that's the number 1, 2, and 3 priority you should have is your portfolio. So if you don't have a good portfolio, frankly, nothing matters. So get that taken care of first. 3 to 5 projects should do it, but make sure they're fully deployed, functional projects. Like it shouldn't be just a GitHub link and that's it, because you never know who's looking at it. The person who's looking at your resume or your portfolio might not be a programmer, right? So if he just sees a bunch of GitHub links and that's it, he or she might not be able to properly assess your skill level. So you definitely need to have a portfolio with a couple strong projects. 3 to 5 is a good number, and all 5 of them should accentuate a different sort of area. Different skill sets. So maybe one with Google Maps, one with React Redux, another one with Firebase for real time. Blah, 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 blah. And then once you get all those deployed and ready to go, then you can start putting out your name and seeing what comes back. So take care of that first. Assuming you have that taken care of, then I would recommend 30 an hour in the major metropolitan areas in the United States. So I think one thing that's worth pointing out to maybe European people is that the United States is kind of like a handful of countries all meshed together. So with that said, the various regions of the U.S. have pretty disparate economies. So $100 an hour in New York City, which is considered somewhat median or maybe even slightly below the average, can be a king's ransom in Vermont, which is why I'm thinking about moving to Vermont. That's why I keep on saying New York City or San Francisco, where you're going to get the highest rate. So when you're looking at $30 an hour in New York City, that's like free. That's free to me. That's free labor. But $30 an hour in I don't know, Montana, I guess, might be a very comfortable rate, comfortable living. So take that for what it's worth. So the free stuff I did when I was first starting out, I did an iPhone application with a contact back home in Connecticut from one of my former colleagues, and he had me work with an overseas dev team. The whole thing was a train wreck, as you might imagine. It was my first ever project. I didn't charge anything for it, and it was just a learning experience for me. I spent about a month, I would say, about 20 hours a week for a month. What I learned from that experience, though, was how much stuff breaks in production. My app that I was developing with this team was breaking in production all over the place, and dealing with all the bug reports and trying to decipher very oh, hey, good morning. Poorly written descriptions, was eye-opening to me. It was very eye-opening, and I had a hard time getting used to that. Um, and so that was free. I didn't make any money off that. The agreement was if the app made any money in the App Store, then I would take a percentage. But that never came to pass. So that was just a free situation for me, free labor on my part. One thing that's worth considering as far as free internship, unpaid internships goes, is that yeah, you might not be getting paid, but you have to remember the tech company that's hiring you, they're not getting anything out of you either for at least the immediate term. For the first couple weeks, they're going to get no usable work out of you, and they're going to, not only that, they're going to have to get someone to train you, right? They're going to have to get like one of their senior devs to sit down and spend time. So now they're losing time from the senior dev to train the intern or the interns so that the interns are not useless. And then over time, hopefully, the interns will start producing some value, which may never happen. So you have to understand the value exchange has to go both ways. And this is one thing junior devs by and large don't quite get. And having worked with a handful of junior devs myself, probably around 10 by now, this is like the number one thing they don't get, is that I'm not getting anything out of it either. In fact, I'm losing a lot of my time trying to train people up. And then what ends up happening is maybe after 3 or 4 weeks, the junior dev decides that this isn't for him. They don't even want to be a programmer anymore. Maybe that's it. That happened a few times. What's happened a couple times as well is the junior dev gets a little ahead of himself, and they think that they can go off on their own now. Right? That's happened twice to me, where basically I've had to train this guy to a point where he's just not completely useless. So I show them things like how to compile their CSS, how to minify, stuff like that, how to set up a Webpack config, things of that sort, like things that are pretty rudimentary, very basic. But to the junior developer, he might think that he's learning like cutting edge stuff, right? I'm just trying to get him out of the useless category. And then after maybe a month of that, they start, some of them start thinking like, hey, I'm really getting the hang of this. I think I can go off on my own and start billing big bucks like this Dan Kwan joker. And then they do that. They try, right? But what happens on my end is I just lost 3, 4, 5 weeks training someone, and then I didn't get any value in return. That's happened twice to me now. Most recently, almost a year ago. And to the point where I'm extremely wary about hiring developers. Oh, by the way, these developers weren't free. I was paying these developers too. So I never hire free, because whenever that happens, there's no accountability. So I'm very against hiring for free. It's not like a matter of generosity either. It's a selfish thing. Like if I'm paying somebody, that person is then accountable for what I assign. Right, so it gives me some peace of mind knowing that this is the work I assign. Maybe it won't get done, but at least the person will try to get it done. However, with software engineering, if I'm hiring a junior dev, I already know going in that the first couple of weeks, upwards of the first month, I will get literally no value out of this individual, and I will lose value spending my time trying to explain stuff to this person. Right, like how to manage like merge conflicts and stuff like that. Like if I have to explain how to manage merge conflicts to somebody, which is going to take a long time. It might take like 3 hours, like going through a bunch of merge conflicts and understanding how to resolve them and stuff like that. I have to explain all that to this individual, and then that's 3 hours I'm not billing my client. Right, so let's say a typical client $150 an hour. That's $400 that I didn't make. Explaining stuff to a beginner, and the beginner is thinking the whole time that, well, I'm not being paid for this. This is this is a free internship. Like I should be getting paid for this, right? So the exchange of value isn't properly seen from the junior developer side oftentimes. So that's a very key consideration. So if you're looking at an unpaid internship, a very important question is, okay, well then what value do I bring to this company? And can I immediately deliver that value, right? If the answer is yes, then I probably wouldn't do an unpaid internship. I would walk away from that. But the answer might not be yes. You have to remember that your mere presence at the office doesn't provide value, right? Unless you're doing stuff like fetching coffee and stuff like that, right? But the thing is, a lot of beginners, and I find this more to be the case with younger people, so like college age and maybe like 25 and younger, they don't understand that at all. So the exchange of value is not even considered. So to them, an unpaid internship is they're doing free labor. But if somebody's sitting down trying to explain how to manage, like how to evaluate a pull request, right? How to do code review, stuff like that. That's time that a senior developer is spending with the junior developer. So now the senior developer is not doing the work he needs to be doing. And so you're losing time on the senior dev and the junior dev, right? So it's a lot to consider. But if you're looking at a stack like just basic Node Express with some simple templating engines, and you already know you got that down because you've been watching all my videos, so you know you got that down cold. That's not even remotely difficult for you. And then that's like the nature of your unpaid internship. I probably would ask for money at that point. I would also present it that way. I would say, like, look, here's what you need me to do. I understand the nature of the requirements. However, I can deliver what you need right now. Like, this is not an internship in the sense that I need to be trained, which is what an internship is supposed to be. This is something I can deliver value to your company today, right? And if that's the case, then most smart business people will be happy to pay you. But a lot of my junior devs that I've worked with, they don't understand. Like, I want to pay them. Like, I want to give them money. I want to make sure they're happy with payment, because if that's the case, then they will continue delivering value in return. I'm not looking to siphon value off for free. That's not going to work for me, because as soon as the junior developer is unhappy with the situation, he quits, and I don't want that, right? So that's an important consideration to remember as far as when you're looking at a free internship. I would say the most important thing is who is the tech lead you will be working under. Now, if you're working under nobody, if there is no tech person, it's just a startup who's looking for free labor, no, don't do that. That's not going to go well. That's just not going to go well. I've seen that situation go to hell many times. So that would just be, you wouldn't be benefiting at all from that. But if you're working under a strong tech lead who has a strong pedigree, so like maybe he worked at a big company beforehand, maybe he's the founder of the company, and he worked at like Amazon or Google or whatever, then yeah, that'll be a good learning experience. It would definitely be worth your while to learn under a person like that, because another thing that most self-taught junior devs don't understand, and I certainly am guilty of this, is that what you learn, on your own, or even on a boot camp, for example, or like even Turbo 360 or Code Academy or Free Code Camp, whatever, all those materials are kind of leveled down for the sake of the beginner, right? And I do the same on Turbo 360. Like, there is just no way I could even come close to doing what I do professionally on Turbo 360. The levels are simply so far apart that if I started doing what I do professionally on Turbo 360, I would have like 4 users. Like, everyone would just quit right away. Like, it would just be too much too soon, and people would be like, I can't understand any of this. I'm going to go back to Free Code Camp. And you know what? That I wouldn't blame them. That would make a lot of sense. But yeah, go for it, Otto. And if it's in America, shoot for 30 an hour. If it's in the United States, on the coastal cities, so New York or San Francisco. So keep that in mind. But going back to what I was saying before, that's never really fully explained in these tutorial websites, including mine. Like, I don't really get into it. I don't really find much value in like trying to scare people. But the truth of the matter is, what I do professionally with my clients is so far beyond what I ever do on Turbo or what you ever see in Free Code Camp. It's literally inconceivable. So I can't really convey it. So if you're a junior developer who's being offered a free internship, an unpaid internship, excuse me, where you can experience that basically assault on your senses. That's essentially what it is. It's basically like waking up by having somebody throw an ice cold bucket on you. It's like that. Like, imagine, like, that's how shocking it is to your system. That's a good thing. Take it. You want that. You need that experience. And then, only then will you know whether or not you want to do this for a living. It's a totally different experience now. If you watch my React Native tutorials, you'll see Ryan does all those tutorials. That's one of my people who I trained about a year ago. Ryan's going through this right now. I basically set him up with his entire client base in the past 12 months. And every single one is just inundating him with work. Because he's a good developer, so that's what happens when you're good. You just get bombarded with work. And he is just crushed under just tons of like merge requests and like conflicts and all these errors coming up and people like, committing the code to the wrong branch, stuff like that. And he's now finding what professional development really is all about, and is nowhere near what what you learn in a controlled environment in a classroom setting, or even in like an online setting like Turbo 360. Keep in mind, Turbo 360, the tutorials I put on there are sort of sanitized. Like I stripped them down to the bare essence of what the viewer needs to understand the concept. That's the whole point of a tutorial. That's what they're supposed to do. But an actual live production code base, not even close. Not even close. If you can imagine a 3-year-old code base that started out in Angular 1 that's currently into a migration into React and Redux, that was worked on by 25 people because they hired all these contractors who came in and out, who didn't give a shit about documentation. They don't care about best practices. They have no tests in their code, no test integration whatsoever. And it's just a complete Frankenstein mess. That's a normal assignment for me. That is a normal project for me on a professional basis. If you watch one of my videos called the Wolf Projects, where basically all I do is I put out fires, that's the reason why. So imagine walking into that mess. And also, if you look at one of my Turbo 360 projects, I don't know, they're reasonable size, but they're not really that big. Just multiply that by maybe 5 or 6. So multiply the file sizes by 5 or 6. Multiply the folder directories by 5 or 6. Let me open up one of my projects right now. So here is this typical project that I would do on Turbo, right? So here's the React Redux code base, right? Pretty simple, not too crazy, right? This is I'm just working on this for a Turbo, like a tutorial project that I'm going to put out soon. Now multiply all these folders and files by 5 in terms of like how many there are. And like also like consider the directory structure. It's not very well organized. Maybe you have presentation directory and view directory and presentation 2 directory, and like it's just all over the place, right? That's the typical code base that I work with. Like that's what I normally expect in a contract assignment at a Silicon Valley startup that that went through 4 contractors in 2 years, and none of them cared about proper documentation and test coverage and unit testing or anything like that, right? So that's what I deal with, and that's why I get paid what I pay. Like that, your job is to deal with those situations. Now, if you're an unpaid intern, you and also if this is your first professional experience, there is no way ever you could have seen a mess like that I normally see, right? It's just impossible, right? So the sooner you can gain exposure to that, the sooner you can experience that unique joy of a legacy code base, the better off you'll be. I mean, ultimately the answer might be, I don't want to do this for a living, which is good too. Like you find out sooner. Don't find out 5 years in. That would be tragic. Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Retina. Yeah, Ryan enjoys making those videos. He's taking a little time off right now because he's actually getting married in about 2 months. So you won't be hearing from him much until probably around mid-September. The figure around towards the end of the baseball season. So, but I'm going to take over some of that stuff, and I actually hired another person to do some more React Native content. It's a girl, and she's going to get started soon on that. So, so hopefully we'll keep that ball rolling and keep on generating React Native tutorials because those are pretty popular. Those get a lot of good feedback and a lot of good playback. So we'll keep on hammering those out, or try to at least. And then I might go back to just actual regular Swift native code, just actual iOS Swift. Go back to my roots. That's where I started coding. I was an iOS developer, pure iOS, so Objective-C and Swift for the first roughly 4 years of my career, 3 to 4 years. I didn't really start picking up the web stack seriously until around 2014. But I'm thinking about going back to regular Swift for some projects because, hey, I kind of miss it actually. I kind of miss the regular iOS stuff that I used to do because I was actually pretty good at that. I was getting to a level I was pretty, I was feeling like I was really getting it down. I mean, I was getting it down, and oh, okay, I'll check that out. I haven't checked the Slack yet today, so I'll take a look at that. Thanks, right now. But there's a lot of cool stuff I can do in regular Swift using Xcode that I don't know how to do in React Native yet. And I'm not really inclined to find out. Like I want to just stick with the regular Swift. As long as I have that skill set, which I still do, I may as well just make videos out of it. And if people like it, great. If not, it wouldn't be the first time. So it's all the same. So yeah, I don't know if Jake is watching. He's probably not watching this, but I'll probably just send him an email with a link to this this live stream. But that would be my response to whether or not you should work for free. I wouldn't write it off right away. There are a lot of people I've met along the way who write that off too soon. They're like, oh, it's unpaid. I'm not going to do that. Or like, even worse, it's like, oh, it pays too low. I've met people who turn down full-time jobs in New York City for like $45,000, which is a shitty salary in New York City. There's no doubt about that. But what are the alternatives, right? Like, what else do you have lined up? Are you better off on your own? I mean, maybe the answer is yes. I don't know, but I'm thinking about people in particular that I know who've told me this, and just judging by what I know, I'm thinking like, why would you turn that down? Like, what do you have lined up that's better, right? Because, like for example, I didn't hire them. Like, I'm not going to hire some of these people to even for $30 an hour, right? So that what that means is like, okay, now you lost the $45K a year, which, okay, that's a lowball salary. Maybe you can negotiate that up to $50K, $55K, whatever. But more importantly, you just lost the experience, the 1 to 2 years of experience where your skill set will level up tremendously, right? And then maybe 6 months will go by and you still don't have anything lined up. I meet people like this all the time. I know because they come to my meetups. So it's like, hey, it's been 4 months. What are you still working on? Oh, I'm just still hammering out my portfolio. It's like, geez, it's taking you 4 months to get that ready, right? So, if you have an offer on the table, even if it's kind of a lowball offer, as long as the experience is pertinent, right? So if it's a shitty PHP, WordPress, whatever, then yeah, you can walk away from that. But if it's Node Express for like a cash-strapped startup and they're just looking to save money, they're trying to find ways to cut corners on that. I'm not saying it's an ideal situation. I wouldn't be thrilled with it either, but you got to get the ball rolling. You got to get in the game. You got to get started now, right? Too many people are just waiting for the perfect opportunity. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. You're not good enough for the perfect opportunity. You have to take whatever opportunity you can get and then get good enough, because that's exactly what I did, right? I wasn't good enough to get a good opportunity in 2012, and I got nothing but shitbag opportunities for the first 6 months that I lived in New York City. And guess what? I took them. Like I did the jobs because I wasn't getting anything else anyway, right? But it only took a few months before I started getting good offers. And then after the first year, I was in the game. I haven't looked back since. By 2013, I was making over $100 an hour, and I haven't looked back since. And from there, it's just building your skill set, working on new things. Because at that point, it's still Objective C. So I didn't know anything else. So I had to start. I knew I had to continue evolving my skill set. But if I had waited 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, whatever, that would have stalled my development, my process. A lot of the work I did is free, and that's just the nature of the game. I think a lot of people sort of they overestimate their leverage. I think I have the opposite problem. I tend to underestimate my leverage. At least earlier on, I did, and so I would tend to sort of jump on whatever opportunity I could. And a lot of them were shitty. I'm not gonna lie. Like I took a lot of shitty jobs with shitty clients, and sort of dirt bags, and people had dumb ideas and just unrealistic people, and I did a lot of that stuff. You got to start somewhere. Right? I did that for like 6 months, and then after a while, I started to build up better and better clientele, right? But a lot of people have this notion that they can just start out, working for the Airbnbs and the Instagrams and whatnot. And there are people who can do that. Don't get me wrong. There are people who are capable of that. I just wasn't one of them. And the question you got to ask yourself is, are you one of them, right? And like what like based on what evidence, based on what indications? And if the answer is yes, that's great. God bless you. Do what you can do. Take advantage of whatever assets you got. Take advantage of it. But if the answer is no, figure out how you're going to make it work. Or if you can make it work, right? And if that means a free internship, or I should keep saying free, unpaid internship, hey, there are worse fates. Taking an unpaid internship, again, assuming the circumstances are right? I mean, so if you're working under a good senior developer and what do you call if the stack is a modern stack, then yeah, jump on that, take it, and learn as much as you can, absorb as much as you can. You're basically getting a free education out of that. People do approach me a couple times a year, handful of times, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, saying, "Hey, I found you on YouTube, or I saw your meetup, whatever. I'd like to offer to work for you for free." Right? And I turn those down now. Even free is not good enough, because I know that I'll have to spend so much time training this person that it's not really free. And I've already been burned by that a couple times. So you have to really look at it from that point of view, right? You have to look at it from like, it's not really unpaid. Like they are devoting resources to increasing your skill set. And if you can deliver any value at any point in time, to them, that's considered a win, right? So you really have to look at it from that point of view. Most companies have experienced what I experienced on a much bigger level, where they've spent all this time and money training people, and then they lose all that time. So understand that side of the table, and if you can really see it from that point of view, it should work out. I think it should be fun. So I'm going to leave it at that for Jake's question. I'll just send this back to Jake with a link to the video. But before I call this a wrap, does anyone have any other questions or comments they want to get in? Node.js versus PHP for beginners, Mukesh. I guess what you're asking is which one would you learn? I needed more information on that, right? Like, where are you based out of? Like, if you're in the United States versus some other country, and what are you going for? Freelance, full time, stuff like that. I need those questions and require some context. So, if you can offer a little bit more context, I'd be happy to answer it. It's not black and white, it's not a simple answer like, oh, just do this and that's it. So kind of like Otto's question, it requires a little bit more nuance based on the context. So that covers just about all my thoughts for the working for free topic. So I'm going to call it a wrap, and I'm going to start trying to do these live streams more and more. I'm going to try and do it every day. We'll see if I can maintain that. But if I do start doing these every day, I'll do them at the same time every day, so people will know when to log in. So in all likelihood, that time will be evenings, roughly 9 p.m. Eastern, so that people on the West Coast can also catch it after work. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I don't know about overseas, but 9 p.m. Eastern is what I'm going to shoot for every day. And then hopefully that'll reconcile with people on the West Coast. That'll be 6 p.m. on California time, and I can capture most of at least the U.S. time zone. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.